Hello there. Welcome to the Seafood Business Accelerator online resources. Today we're going to talk about grants. I'm Debra, your host, and with me is Desiree Baker, a grant writing expert, and much, much more. Today, Desiree is joining us from Bella Bella. Desiree founded REV Consulting with a vision to uplift Indigenous communities. With over 30 years of experience in grant writing and business planning, Desiree is the perfect person to provide advice on how to find grants and how to secure grant funding. So Desiree, tell us a little bit about yourself and let's have a conversation about finding grants and grant writing.
Oh, for sure. Thank you, Debra. Really happy to be sharing my information with your community members. And I love the Seafood Business Accelerator program. It's great for them. So I'm from the Namgis First Nation, and I'm here today in Heiltsuk territory doing work. REV stands for Robbins Eye View Consulting. That's the name of my company. I have clients all over BC. I'm so excited. I'm actually just going to be moving into Manitoba and Ontario now. And actually was very, so people have found me from all over. I like to help with business and economics. I do plans, like I'm here doing a labor market study. This is my 8th trip into community. So as long as they have me, I work with them. This is our 3rd project with Heiltsuk. And we're very excited. We've already got a grant and we'll be coming back for, we got them a REDEP, Rural Economic Diversification.
So you were involved in that. Excellent.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Had quite a few people from Heiltsuk First Nation attend our program. So yeah, it's good. Lots of synergies there.
Right? Yeah, and they have their fish processing plant here, and so they do storage and ice making, and they're still using that facility right now. They're working on a business plan internally for their community-based fishing. So I get to learn more and more every time I come here. And so, yeah, I help communities with a lot of things. And then with businesses, I help with business structure and right from the start, a business plan and how to get them funding if they're eligible. So really happy to help with this and very honored to be interviewed today. So thank you.
That's terrific. So actually, that's a good segue as well. The Seafood Business Accelerator is all about helping people capture more for their harvests. So more may be money, more may be benefits to the community. More means whatever it means to you. But that's what we want to help with the Seafood Business Accelerator, and it's a tailored program. So we've had people that are interested in adding value to their catch. We've had people involved in wild harvest, people involved in shellfish farming, people involved in developing community programs. And one thing that almost everybody, well, not almost everybody, needs is funding, to move their project forward. So that is why we have Desiree on the team. And Desiree is one of our mentors, and she has provided, just invaluable advice to the people on our program. And today we want to talk about the innovation plan, which is a canvas or a template that we use to help the entrepreneurs or the trainees in our program focus in on their project. And so I'm talking to Desiree today about grant writing and how to find grants, but also how the innovation plan can help people access funding and write secure grants. So let's do that. Let's talk a little bit about the Seafood Business Accelerator. Desiree, you were a mentor last year. Surprisingly, our trainees didn't utilize your services as much as we wanted them to, or we hoped that they would. So, by talking about it here and having people listen to these, I was going to call it a podcast, but these interviews, maybe they'll gain some understanding of the value of what you bring to the program and how you can help them. So how what are your thoughts on the SBA?
Oh, I think it's great. And, it's amazing for them to start a business, or like you say, some of them last year, were thinking about, let's say, a fish processing plant because they only had one in their whole territory, or something where they want to add to it. And the innovation plan is essential because it's almost like a business plan in a sense, right? It guides them, and there's all those stories, like you can't get to where you're going if you don't know where that is, right? You need to follow your plan. I'm also a big believer in the law of attraction. And as soon as you write something down, you're calling it out. And it's also a difference of speaking about it and thinking about it to putting pen to paper. And they're also like taking that one step further. So, there's so many reasons for them to do that. And also that innovation plan, they need to research and they need to find things out, which will help them with their business and help them with their business plan to secure funding.
Excellent, excellent. So people who are listening or watching this interview, we do have a little video. I think it's two minutes or something like that about the innovation plan specifically,
Mm.
and also in the online resources there is a template a fillable template that you can use if you want to start working on your plan. And basically, what it is that the Canvas, it just prompts you or makes you think about, okay, well, I need to think about business planning, and I need to think about funding, and I need to think about market research. And there's 10 different segments of the plan that we're asking people to think about as they're moving forward with their business. So let's just get right into grants. So where can people find grants for seafood related projects, Desiree?
Well, depending on where they are on the island, there's the Comox Valley Community Foundation, and grants always change. So I always encourage them to go straight if they're in that catchment area of that Comox Valley Community Foundation. Most funders have a newsletter, so I strongly
Yes.
encourage them to
Yes.
sign up for every newsletter they can get, because sometimes it's focused to that funder or that region, but sometimes it's province wide or region wide that extends further than where they actually live. So I always encourage people to sign up for those newsletters. There's also the Indigenous Financial Institutions, the IFIs, and there's the New Channel of Economic Development Corporation. There's also the Island Coastal Economic Trust. And so there's a few. You can also always Google, and I also say use Google, use Bing, use Yahoo, use a few different search engines because different ones pick different things up. And they can always search, is there any funding for a First Nations business? Is there any funding for a seafood business? Is there any, they can search as well. But I would ask them to sign up for all those newsletters and see what's available. And then if they're serious about it, even like the Indigenous Financial Institution, those coaches also usually know what other funding is out there. So I'd
Yeah.
also encourage them to call and make an appointment with them, and they also help them step by step through the process as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. The newsletters are key. Attending events, getting known. Our graduates meet a lot of people at the final showcase where they learn about other programs. Desiree, have you used any of the Indigenous pathways? There's both a federal and a provincial Indigenous pathways program that help entrepreneurs.
Yes, yes, I have for my clients, not for
Yeah.
myself, but for my clients.
Yeah.
And I used it for the food sovereignty. And they knew what was out there. And then she referred me to somebody else within that program that she felt knew something more than she did, which is amazing, right? Everyone has their strengths. And
Yeah.
so that is a great program for sure, and highly recommend it. Yeah. And they follow up. They like, hey, how's everything going? Oh, I'll keep that
Great.
in mind. And they keep client files. And so when something else opens, she shot me emails months later. Hey, does your client still need this? And so
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, great. And actually, the First Nations Health Authority also has some programs too, and that I found out through newsletters, right? So yeah,
Mhm.
that's exactly it. So sign up on the newsletters, and we through the SBA also provide information to the people who are in our network. So it's all about networking, I would say, to find grants. Have you used AI at all in your searching for grants?
I have. I have. It's good and bad.
Yeah.
Um, I've learned to, once you use it a little bit, you learn how to add specific words and try and make your search better.
Yeah.
Um, I have found even if I say, show me open grants, let's say for a prawn business, an Indigenous owned prawn business in Victoria. I will get certain things, but some when I go to look have closed or
Right.
they run out of
Right.
funding. But there are the good side that it will show me things sometimes I never knew about. So
Yeah. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I agree with that. That's one of the reasons why, looking at a fund list always ends up being disappointing because by the time they print something, it's out of date,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Yeah. So that's why when you get the newsletters, that's fresh information. So you want to follow up on that fresh information. And I think I remember from your presentation to our trainees last year, you talked about about keeping a calendar. That was it.
Mm.
So keeping a calendar because the grants are often offered year after year.
Mhm.
You want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So I just buy a cheap dollar store monthly calendar and I write when that grant has closed and then I put 3 months backwards from that check on this grant. And then I keep myself a little list, even if I copy that link and I've created my own spreadsheet. So I have farming, aquaculture, culture. I have this whole big
Yeah,
list
you
that I
have a
just
big one, I think. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, that I just throw the link into. But there are so many and you can pay for grant search. Like there's Grant Watch and there's a few Grant Seeker. There are these programs and companies that charge you, and I don't know how much they charge you. I haven't looked into it.
Yeah.
Um, but my friend has it, and he's a fellow consultant, and he said he believes it's worth the money. So I should probably look into that. And then that saves you all of that. You click in, what you want and what region, and it'll show you what's open. And there is foundation search for foundations, but foundations are more not really related to business. They're more like cultural and
Right.
language and things like that. So I wouldn't recommend that for businesses, but and for profits. It's
Mhm.
very hard too, just so people know, it is very hard to find a grant for a for-profit business. You can get one through the Indigenous financial institutions and some of the trusts, but you will never ever fully fund a business. So they do have to have their own money. Typically, you have to have somewhat of a good credit or be able to work with them to bring your credit up. So there's a few things like that too that, they have to know, but not to discourage you, but a nonprofit or a registered charity can get much more grants. So I always caution people for actual businesses, it's quite hard to find a grant. Startup usually, and a few things here and there, but I mean, we'll give them all the resources we can, but they also have to have their own money for sure. They will never get it fully funded.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. My experience has been for businesses that are looking for funding. It's always going to be a project. So it's not going to be for starting the business. It will be for a particular project. Usually, it's to purchase capital. So for hard costs. So if you're looking at building plant, you probably won't get money for building the plant, but you might be able to get some money for for buying equipment that's going in the plant. And we've seen a lot of success in that area in the seafood sector. So, buying a piece of equipment so that you can do more than you were able to do before. There's always measurements attached to these funds. So you're buying a piece of equipment, so that means you're going to be able to hire that many more people. Or in the case now, actually, it'd be interesting to hear what Desiree has to say. Now there's a real shortage of labor.
Mhm.
It's hard to find people to work, certainly in processing plants. So there may be a shift and buying equipment that reduces the need for labor may be more of a focus than it has been in the past. But no matter what, you have to create a strong reason for why you need this money, and you have to have expertise as well as matching funding typically in if in a business case. and then you have to report after.
Yes.
And different funders have more or less reporting requirements. And I think it's important to consider that before you accept the funding, because sometimes the reporting can be quite onerous, and other times it can be almost negligible, that there isn't very much reporting at all. So
Mhm.
things to keep in mind. On this topic, what some tips on writing winning proposals? What do you advise there, Desiree?
Oh, definitely know your product and know your plan, things like that. And that's where your mentors and your coaches can come into helping you. If you've never written a business plan or you've never written your innovation plan, you can lean on us. Also, having a template is ideal because they don't have to think of everything. They can figure it out and fill it in. Definitely doing some research, knowing what you need and things like that. Because by filling in those templates, it also teaches you, well, can I make that money? Can I make it all year? What if it's something, prawns, and it's only 3 months a year you can catch those prawns? How is that a viable business for the rest of the year? How is that viable for all this money you're going to put out? So doing that plan also lets you know if you can make it. So that's very important as well. I'd also say lean on the funders. A lot of the funders also offer some sort of help to help you do that. And they know very well. They're very experienced, like I am, in to try and making sure that that application is successful. So I think leaning on the people that have the experience to help you, and then you become your own expert on your business and your plan. So that's very important.
Yeah, good advice. Yeah, well, I've done many things over over time, and I have worked for some funders as well. And when I was in that role, and what I've seen since, is the funders, they want the money to go out, right? So
Mhm.
they really do want to fund projects,
Yeah.
and so they'll often go out of their way to help the people that are applying. However, you have to demonstrate that you are trying and that you've done your homework. So I would say almost all funds have a guide, right? A program guide.
Yes.
Maybe not all, but most of them have a program guide that talks about, what is eligible, what isn't eligible, the timelines, what's expected. And so make sure to read that before
Mhm.
you contact them if you have a question. There's nothing more frustrating as a funder, if you're on the funder side of the table and somebody asks, phones and asks you a question that's clearly written in the program guide, like they've already answered that question. So you want, and I strongly suggest, and I think Desiree would agree, if you do have a question, call them, right? And
Mhm.
and ask them,
Yep.
and develop a relation. Everything is about relationships. Develop a
Mhm.
relationship with them, and then that person will be, keen to help you, and keen to get your proposal to a point where they can submit it to the board that makes the decisions.
Right.
So
And I'd also say one step further to that, and that's very good advice, is sometimes as well they have an evaluation criteria or evaluation guide. And then it'll say, this section is weighted at 40%
yeah,
and that section's weighted at 10%. So don't put all your energies into the 10%. Still do it, but focus more on the one that's weighted at 40%. And
yeah,
sometimes too, they also say like for this or for that, so definitely look at the evaluation guide if they have one. That's very important too.
yeah. Good, excellent. How about real practical tips in terms of online applications? A lot of them have portals now that, if there's any funders listening, are extremely frustrating to work with. They
Mhm.
usually have restricted characters.
Mm.
Often the character restriction is so tight on the most important sectors, you can't get everything in there that you want to get in.
Mhm.
How about some tips for dealing with that?
Yes. So a lot of them will offer a Word document to work on. You also definitely have to read. A lot of them will warn you you can't save. So you have to work on the Word document and fill that all in. Especially if you're collaborating like myself as a grant writer. I need to put everything in and then have Deborah approve it, right? So I need to work on that Word document, and that's our working document until I'm ready to put everything in the portal. Also, be very careful, and lots of times they'll warn you as well. You need to set up a profile, and that profile takes 2 weeks to get approved. So you can't do it last minute. You have to put in your application, you have to get approved, you have to set up your profile. So you have to be very careful and read their instructions. If it's a Word document, go through that whole Word document, because it might be a question, but embedded is there in there. Like for me, with a lot of my communities, for instance, might not be so much for an individual, but it's a good example. I might get to the whole thing and I think I'm done and I'm golden and I'm ready to submit. Oh, you need a band council resolution. What the heck? And it's due tomorrow. And now I need to get 5 people to sign this. So you also sometimes have a checklist as well. So definitely triple check that checklist. And I would work backwards and get all those things first. Because if it's essential, I need a band council resolution and then I don't get it, I've done all that work and I can't submit it. And a lot of them will say, unless you have everything we've asked, your submission, like it's in the garbage right now. And so definitely check their checklists and definitely check if they need something or a letter of support, for instance, and then who you're going to ask and how many letters of support. And some require that as well. I would say for an individual business, it might be a little bit harder, but definitely for communities or First Nations, what I do is I recommend different levels of support, like Destination BC, for instance. This is a little bit harder with seafood businesses, but if it could tie to tourism or like Bella Bella, for instance, and all these coastal communities are very well known for their fresh seafood. Well, if I had something that processed and that's going to tie into tourism, maybe even I can ask Indigenous Tourism BC for a letter of support or Destination BC for a letter of support. Hey, we know that this business is going to improve tourism to this region. So I'd also encourage sometimes, even if it doesn't say a letter of support is required, but if I have one and you don't, and we're at a tie, I might win because of that. So sometimes a little bit extra to show that you've thought about it, you've gone that extra mile, because all funding is super competitive and every funding source is overprescribed. I think everyone. And I'm like probably about 60-70% approval rate, which is very high for grants. But the ones that don't get approved have said, well, it was, you know, I'd even done one for a town that had 90,000 away from home people, and they were opening it up to everybody. And I'm like, we are golden. We're going to get this because they are opening it up and they specifically wanted those away from home and those are lacking. Like I'm away from home. I never get my band funding. I would love to be included and get something. And then I get a note back from the funder, oh, we were overprescribed and we're only funding regional projects. And I was so mad. I'm like, we did all this work and we're still covering like this big area and this big amount of people. And I thought I was 90% sure we're getting this grant. And then all of a sudden they blow you out of the water. Oh no, we're only approving regional grants. Like, so sometimes you're just screwed either way and it doesn't matter. So, not to take it to heart and just keep trying, because you're not going to get every grant you apply for either. It's just never going to happen. Even myself with 20 years experience, I never get every grant I apply for.
Well, you've got a pretty high rate there. But I don't, of course, people, everybody is low on time. However, writing a grant, like once you've done one and done it well or fairly well, you just keep building on that. So, even, the one that you didn't win, and that would have been a big one from the sounds of it. But you could always pull pieces from it for the next grant. So it's not wasted time. I will just say something that I've experienced is sometimes, actually most of the time, people they look for help for writing grants, and then they sort of leave it to the grant writer to figure it out. And the entrepreneur or even the nonprofit, they don't actually read what the grant writer has written. And the grant writer can only regurgitate what somebody has told them.
Mhm.
And so when you submit this document with, if you don't read it before it goes in, you are committed to what the grant writer thought they heard you
Mhm.
say.
Right.
And, most of the time it's right. Most of the time it's right, but sometimes there'll be something in there that's not what you thought.
Mhm.
And now you're stuck with it because you submitted this document without reading it. So that's a caution. The grant is for you, your business, or your not for profit, and you should know what's in there and know what it is that you've committed yourself to. And I guess another thing on the same thing as Desiree was talking about there, getting a grant, it's free money and it's a bonus, right? I think thinking about it as a bonus, not something that you count on.
Mhm.
So, if you get this grant, then you can do that much more. Often I encounter companies who think that there's all kinds of grant money out there and that once they hire a grant writer or they start tapping into these grants that they're just going to live off of all this free money that's available. It takes a fair amount of work to get that money and you do have to be accountable. Sometimes grant agencies want to have every single receipt, everything that you spent.
Mhm.
Actually, we didn't talk about that. Like sometimes grants are you receive the money and you go out and spend it and everything is good. But other times they are what's it called, Desiree? It's reimbursement programs,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So, and often the company ones are like the private industry ones
Mhm.
are reimbursement programs. So you may get, win $100,000 grant, but you have to show that you spent the money
Mhm. To get
and
it back.
then you get repaid. You don't
Yeah.
get the money if you don't
Yeah.
spend it.
Yeah. Yeah. And also to be cautious, like I'm co-owner of a resort and we are off grid. And so we applied through the Destination BC Climate Action Program. So we got a plan. We won grant stream one last year, this grant stream two this year. We won $15,000 to upgrade our solar system. But then I had to add Destination BC as for my insurance, and they sent all this criteria. And then I had to send that to my insurer and ask them to say, yes, we've now added DBC, which is crazy for a $15,000 grant that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with my business.
Yeah.
But it was a essential. So there are things like that too that you don't even know, until you get it. And then she's like, oh, I need this before I can release the funds. I'm like, what, for 15,000 a year, nothing to do. I almost like lost my mind, but I'm like, well, we really need that money, so I'm going to do it. So there are sometimes some very weird criteria that they demand to receive the funds.
That's a good point because insurance is something else, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes they'll require that you have general liability insurance, which can be what, $2,000? So for a
Mhm.
$15,000 grant, it's pretty hard to justify, or that you have WCB, that you have payroll set up and you're making payroll remittances. So those are all things that could be stipulated in a
Mhm.
grant.
Yeah.
Another thing too is often companies come in and they say, "Oh, well, the maximum grant is $500,000, so that's what we want $500,000." You'll have to prove that you needed that $500,000.
Mhm.
And sometimes there was an incident not too long ago. It was a maximum of $500,000, but I knew behind the scenes that they only had $2 million to give the whole industry. So they were not going to be giving anybody 500,000 because that meant there were only four people that would get the grants, right? So your ask should be what you need
Yes.
and what you think you will spend, so that you can justify it. If you end up having to give money back or not spend all the money, then you get kind of a black mark on your company name because
Mm.
you didn't use the funding the way it was supposed to be used.
Yeah.
So that's important to keep in mind as well. So we've gone through, a lot of cautionary information, but bottom line, it's very nice to get a grant. And both Desiree and I have been very fortunate to work with organizations that have received grant money, and we've received grant money ourselves. So it does happen, and it's very, very helpful to have that money. And I mean, in fact, the Seafood Business Accelerator has received grant funding from the Ministry of Agriculture, from Island Coastal Economic Trust, from New Relationship Trust. So, these funds are available and you can access them, that's for sure. So, I've just given examples of funded projects there, but I was going to ask Desiree if she could give an example of a funded project, in seafood or maybe in the food industry, examples that our listeners could relate to.
For sure. I haven't because I was new mentor last year and I'd never got a seafood business grant, but I have helped First Nations because again it's hard for profit, but I've helped First Nations communities get grants for food sovereignty. And so it was actually really good, like you were saying, First Nations Health Authority. So in this instance, it was Fraser Health. They were a Fraser Canyon community. We got them $10,000. And it was for food sovereignty. So what we did
Yep.
was we got them a commercial smoker, a commercial food processor, like a food sealer, and a commercial grade so that I could go buy one for, even probably $100, but to use it over and over. So we got commercial ones. And then we got got a smoker, a freeze dryer, which is very cool because freeze dried things can last for years. And then ideally you freeze dry, like say the vegetables, the fruit, the meat even. Then you vacuum seal it and it will last years. It takes less space, less time, less everything than canning. And lots of time, like a freeze dried strawberry tastes better to me than a typical fresh strawberry.
Yeah, because you
And
condense it. Yeah.
yeah, and so things like that. And then I've also been successful, and I forgot the funder. I'm going to try and remember, but I got this First Nation $90,000. And so what they chose to do and what they wanted to do was a vertical greenhouse. And that was a food sovereignty grant. So I got
Oh,
some,
okay.
yeah, and actually there's 77 homes on community. So they're getting three different vertical greenhouses in kind of three different areas. And then that grows them their herbs, their strawberries. They can grow tomatoes even. They just plant them at different heights. And
Right.
then there's this great company called Sky Acres, and they have,
Oh, okay. Great.
yeah, so I love
Yeah.
each home. Yeah. So what we do is because it's so much more reasonable, and because the other ones like Grocer and I forget the other name, they use HVAC systems. So their minimum is 500,000, where Ishan is like 20, 30,000, you could get a unit. So huge difference. And Ishan has worked with Simon Fraser, I believe, to prove like it's 640 times more nutrient. And those vegetables are the best vegetables I've ever had in my entire life. So
Yeah.
and you can grow herbs. He's got a huge list of things you can grow. And then some people have tried to bring back traditional plants and medicines, whether it was for medicine or to eat, and see how it does in the vertical greenhouse. So there's some
Yeah.
very cool things that are coming out. And so I have been successful in food sovereignty and food preservation.
That's awesome. And in that community, was that through a nonprofit organization that they set up the vertical greenhouses?
No, it was the First Nation itself.
Oh, was the
Yeah.
nation itself. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's something to keep in mind too. Often the nation itself is eligible for these nonprofit charity type the funding programs. Actually, we just sent out a newsletter to our group on what was it called? It was Farm Credit Corporation, and they're providing agra. Oh my God, it just went out yesterday. Anyhow, Farm Credit FCC provides funding to nonprofits, schools, bands for food sovereignty projects as well. So that's another organization that provides funding, and I believe it's fairly easy to apply for. The thing is that it wouldn't be for a business per se. It's for the nation, but the nation and the nonprofits all need entrepreneurs to help them move these projects along, right?
Mhm.
So, another way of working on these projects is to collaborate with a nonprofit, right? So I want to work in food sovereignty and provide seafood in our case, might be another food product to the community. And I'm going to work work with this nonprofit. We'll apply for the funding together and I'll do the work, right? So it's another way of making it work for you as a business. So, another revenue stream. So then you could consider that as a revenue stream for your company and then, work on other avenues to get your product to market or to the community.
Yep, for sure. There's also co-ops as an option. I haven't checked co-op as a funding, potential funding source, but I know a lot of things are being talked about. Like I was at the BC Economic Development Association conference a few months ago in Penticton, and a big thing there, and I had 2 full breakout sessions on it, was about co-op and creating those. And so that's a new thing that people are coming out. Also, as your business entity, you can choose a social enterprise. So it can be incorporated, sole proprietor, all those things. So there's different ways to get funding or partner. And again, too, maybe you could partner with your First Nation as a funder, right? Or a recipient.
Yeah,
So
that's correct.
Yeah. So there's a few options for them.
Desiree, have you heard of other nations funding other nations, like as a financer?
No, the only way I've heard about that is through the First People's Bank, or I forget if I'm not saying that right, but I'd met those 2 men from that at the BC, or no, anyways, at one of my conferences.
Okay.
And there are 48 First Nations who make up this bank. So not specifically like Community A funding Community B, but there are 48 First Nations, or 41, something like that. And they all invest in this bank, and then you go and borrow from that bank.
Okay. Okay.
That's the only time I've heard of it. And I mean, not to say it doesn't happen. I just have never worked with one that has funded the other. There's 3 of them, like the 3 host nations of Vancouver, they've created their own development corporation. But that's, kind of together, and that makes sense. So sometimes nations do come together to create their own development corporation, and then they kind of fund each other in a way. But I've never heard of that. But I mean, it could happen. I just haven't worked with any who've done that.
Yeah, I think it's coming. It's a good segue because one of our next speakers will be Bernard Gilbert from FCC, and he's going to talk on financing, right? And different ways of financing. So we didn't touch on that before, but there's a difference between grants and financing, right? So grants are money you get and you don't have to pay back, and financing is money that you have to pay back. But they're both vehicles that are very useful and needed when you're developing a business. So it's good to know about both. Yeah. So we're coming to time here, Desiree. This has been interesting. I always learn something new when I'm talking with you, and I know that our people will learn lots when they work with you. This interview is available to people so they can watch it anytime and get information that they need. And we hope that they enjoy it and that they learn something as well. Any comments from you, Desiree, as we finish up here?
I would just like to say thank you, and I wish your participants the best of luck, and I'm here if they need me. And thank you for this opportunity to share and help teach them. And it's been my honor to be part of this. So thank you.
Awesome. Have a wonderful day, Desiree.
Thank you. You too.